welcome to hour number 2 on a Monday with hashtag Daily K's host, Peter B. Tired of just scratching the surface of Korea? Want to get deep in the weeds?
We unpack everything about Korea through its history on
Now and Then
with David.
Christmas has come early. Santa has delivered my most desired present of the year. David's saying on for me for the first time.
You're an easy date, aren't you, Pete? All I've got to do is say on,
please.
and I saw your eyes light up. I was like, yes,
the
there we
smile
go.
under my mask is going to burst my mouth. Thank you so much for that, David. That's brilliant.
I've been meaning to do it for a couple of weeks. I finally got it. I'll get it. You know it's the thing that causes me the most stress, that introduction.
It's the small things in life that make the big differences, I feel, David.
Yep, well said.
Have you had a good week since we last saw you? All the listeners on a Monday morning, they're all about the footy chat. Lots of our listeners follow the EPL. Yeah. And your team didn't win. There seems to be a lot of disappointment among our ranks. Were you happy with the Spurs result? Because Son Heung-min scored, right?
Yeah. Our manager, Jurgen Klopp, was not happy with the referee.
I saw some headlines saying
he went about that.
That guy doesn't like him or something.
Yeah, he went up to the word. A 2-2 draw. Manchester City lost at White Hart Lane, first game of the season. So considering the circumstances, a 2-2 draw at White Hart Lane is kind of acceptable.
Yeah.
A little bit disappointed, but you'll never walk alone.
Absolutely.
On we go.
Yeah, indeed. You're still higher than Arsenal. I'm sure we'll definitely finish higher as well. And well done to Son Heung-min. I saw that was his return from his COVID. Yep. Seems like the Premier League is getting really affected by the virus. I wonder if they're going to stop it as well. Call time. Who knows, right?
No idea what's going to happen there. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting segue onto today's topic. Today's topic, then, we're taking a look back at the year as we approach 2022. And the big C word, I suppose. Yeah,
I feel a little bit bad about doing the COVID topic because it is the Christmas season. So I hope we've got some good music to cheer everybody up after this.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yeah. But I think it's really important because we get so focused in the modern age of where we are right now that we sometimes do lose a little bit of perspective. For example, many people will know what happened all around the world in the last 24 hours. Yeah. But they don't know what happened 2 years ago or 20 years ago. We forget. We get this kind of amnesia, I think.
Yeah, it's present in many aspects of society, I think, right? The newest thing is what everyone needs to be talking about. Everyone needs to watch the latest dramas on the streaming services. The movies that have been out 6 months ago, they don't mean anything anymore. And then with the news, you're right. That's kind of, I don't know, is that the way it's always been? Is it technology that's enabled us to do that, perhaps?
Remember, we're meant to be so concerned about Afghanistan, Myanmar, things like this. Where are they in the news now? They're gone. They're part of a cycle. And so today we will talk about COVID. I'm going to start with a quote from Vladimir Lenin. I don't think many shows in Korea will be doing that this morning.
I don't think so.
I'll start you with a quote from Lenin because everything else aside, I do like this quote. And he said, "There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen." Oh. And I think 2021 has been a year where decades could be said to have happened. It's only been 1 year, 365 days. Yeah. But in terms of the experiences, but in terms of how it felt, the emotions and everything involved, it does feel like it's been a decade or so, doesn't it?
I think so. And like we were here last year talking about COVID, it was a very different view, I remember, because it was around this time that the UK got the first ever vaccine in the world, right? Into one of those grandpas or grandmas. I think many of us were hopeful. 2022, next year, we'll be really celebrating. Here in Korea and in the UK in many places, it's actually looking rather grim again.
It is. And so I want to try to take us through that roller coaster from January 2021 to the current day. You mentioned just before I came in about the current restrictions. We're up to about 5,000 cases and the trouble with knock-on effects on the health system. Yes. And the poor woman who did give birth, though. Congratulations. Yes. They have a new life in the world. That's a great thing.
Absolutely.
This weekend, my niece, who is 12, 13, it was her birthday. Okay. And so she wanted to go out in the little countryside town with her friends to have some kind of like green tea frappuccino or papingsu.
Oh, that's sweet.
Wasn't allowed in the shop because she's not vaccinated. Oh. She's 12.
But
those
does it apply
regulations
to the young?
Yeah, from 12. So those and we are a family of vaxxed people.
Sure.
It's just age here. It's not anything political.
Yeah.
But those are the current restrictions that we're currently going through. And that sort of really hit it home for me that this young girl wanted to go out and celebrate her birthday.
Yes.
You know, just have some little drinks with her friends.
Sure.
Feel like an adult, perhaps.
Yeah.
And wasn't allowed because of the new restrictions, which I understand.
Yeah, I think it's been about 2 to 3 weeks since that came into play. If you're unvaccinated, I didn't know it applied to people as young as 12.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Then you can eat or drink alone, but you're not allowed to do it with friends, right? And they're enforcing that, it seems. Yeah, you get fined personally, and then the cafe or restaurant as well, big time, right?
Yeah. So it's a big way, and that's part of South Korea's policy as it stands now. So we'll see what happens. Let's go back to January 2021, start of this year. And at that point, South Korea was waiting for vaccines. So in terms of the performance against COVID, there was a lot of success attributed to South Korea. Daily cases, the record number January last year of daily cases was 1,200. And when it went over 1,000, everybody got scared.
Yeah, we were like, that's crazy.
Oh my word, right? And so we've been dealing with 7,000s regularly. At the time, 1,200 was that record.
We got very worried.
Tracing and tracking was all really good, but there were no vaccines really in South Korea. And when you compared it to the global perspective, it was one of the lowest in the OECD's, South Korea's vaccination rate. And there was this conversation going around the country going, South Korea is Oscar winning, it's Billboard topping, it's, you know, the world's 10th, 9th biggest economy in the world. Why does it not have vaccines in the country? It was a really important, I think, political, cultural and economic conversation that was taking place right there.
Yeah, it was a bit divisive, wasn't it? There were people complaining, saying, all right, sure, we did well until now, but look, when the real things that matter happen, there's the big countries, the UK, the US, that have got the vaccines. Why are we so far behind? I took the other point of view personally, and I said this on the show. We don't need it as urgently, right? The other people the other countries are having many deaths, many cases. They need it quicker. And that was my stance. I was just trying to be positive, I suppose.
It's good to be positive.
Yeah. And then we got the vaccines much later, right?
Yeah, they eventually started, but that was how the year began. And that was the big topic. The vaccines weren't actually in the government budget at the time. They had different plans for everything. And so if we jump forward to February, around the start of the year, the total number of deaths in the country, and even one death is too many.
Sure.
But we were looking at 1,500
in total.
In total, which is relative compared to other countries, still very successful. A lot of attention paid on that. And in February, the February 26th, a Friday morning, the first vaccine is given in South Korea to a nursing home worker in Nowon. And on that day, Dr. Jung Eun-kyung and President Moon Jae-in were going around and observing these vaccines, trying to show their solidarity with the people, trying to encourage people to get the vaccines. And this was the start of, you know, what we're going through now. I think I'm correct to say, or it's appropriate to say, that in South Korea, there hasn't been really too big an anti-vax movement. It's been quite supportive. Of course, everybody is different and there's never 100%, but for the most part, people were waiting for the vaccines. They went and got the vaccines and they were happy to have got them.
Yeah, there are a small number of people who are maybe against it, but it's not as loud a voice as in the UK or especially the US. I've heard a lot of backlash from some quite prominent people in media as well, which has been definitely not the case, I feel, here in Korea.
And when I say that, it has changed over time with the idea of third shots and boosters and different brands of vaccines, all comes into it. But just in that January, February time, South Korea was waiting. And I think that anticipation made everyone very eager, very keen to get the vaccines, January, February, because I think many people believed that was going to be the end of it. You get vaccinated, and that was what they were saying, by the way. Dr. Jung Eun-kyung was saying, get everyone vaccinated, 70-80%, herd immunity, and then by September, October, we would be home free.
We'll be golden.
We still got our masks on, Pete.
It's not proved to turn out quite that way.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
Siska with a message that I think all of us could agree with, saying, please, COVID, go and retire now. Everyone's tired and stressed. And FYI, the booster vaccines is actually a paid one in Indonesia. It's not free anymore. That's interesting. One great thing that Korea has done is pretty much subsidized the vaccines, the treatments, and everything like that. So you haven't had to worry about whether you can afford it, right?
I do like that idea that no COVID, you've been a very naughty boy. Now you can go to your room and you don't come out until you think about what you've done.
Just hang up your boots now. Yeah, you've had your run.
I do like that idea, please. Raul from Argentina. Hello, Raul. You never walk alone. The level of instability is amazing, not only economic, but social, political, to completely agree. 55% fully vaccinated in Argentina, which is still a long way to go, but, it's halfway there, Raul.
Yeah, Raul's often a bit critical about how his country has handled it. And I guess the level in Korea, we got to, I think, around 80% plus with the two vaccines. Yep. And I heard figures this morning for the boosters. I think of the whole population, it's maybe 20-30% already. The booster uptake seems to be a lot. And Silver Granny Lynn says, I think with the Omicron variant in the US, people are finally deciding that they need the vaccine. Yeah, I think the news about how quickly it spreads and stuff like that has prompted a few people to maybe change their minds.
Yeah. Kay in the Caribbean says it's happening in Trinidad too. Unvaccinated kids are not allowed in cinemas or restaurants.
Wow.
So the family can go out for a meal, but the kids can't go.
Oh, goodness.
So if they are young and they haven't been vaccinated, they're not allowed in. That's
wow.
Yeah, I guess that helps keep people at home, because if you could go in but your kids can't, you're going to stay at home with the kids unless you've got a very sympathetic babysitter.
Yeah, here in Korea, I guess if you're young, the kids are young enough, like my two, they don't fall under that category. So as a group of 4, we could technically go to a restaurant, but you don't really want to risk it these days. Jackie says everyone reacts to vaccines or even COVID differently. Moreover, kids' bodies are not fully developed, so that adds to the fear. Yeah, with parents and kids, especially young kids getting vaccinated, is another layer. Even me, when it was no-brainer for me and my mum, even though she's elderly, for the kids, I'm kind of doing more research about the potential side effects and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Right? So moving on with the year, we got to February, so we got our first vaccines here in Korea. That was good.
That was good, and there have been so many good things about South Korea's COVID response. Like you, I am generally positive, and it was in Albert Camus' book, The Plague, where he says, it's one of the lines towards the end, that the plague demonstrates to us that in the human heart, although there is the possibility for bad or for evil, there is a greater possibility for good. And I think South Korea has demonstrated that overall.
I think so.
In March, there was some difficult conversations coming about because Seoul and surrounding areas, Gyeonggi and South Jeolla, they all gave out these orders that foreign workers, non-Korean people, were required by law to take COVID tests. If they didn't, they would be fined. And this has been a story that's kind of repeated throughout the year. It hasn't gone away, that different rules would apply to Korean people and non-Korean people. Even if they were working side by side in the same office, they were both paying taxes, doing their various things, that there was this kind of one rule for us and one rule for non-Koreans. That made many people feel very uncomfortable at the time.
Yeah, especially the foreign community, right? I think a lot of Koreans just thought, oh, maybe it's necessary. They didn't look at the details and stuff, but when you highlighted it to Korean people, I think most Korean people thought, oh, well, that's not fair, is it? If you explained the situation correctly to them in details.
We have to remember that the idea of collectiveness, that idea of uri, has been such fuel for South Korea's success that it comes very naturally, and it's helped South Korea achieve many good things. But when it manifests in those different policies, and there was condemnation, I will say, from various embassies and international press and human rights associations, that they were eventually rescinded. One of the ways that I found best to communicate this idea was always, how would you feel if you were in another country and these rules were being applied to you and not other people? Or if your children were in another country and they were being discriminated against like that, how would you feel? And then the Korean people I would talk to would immediately go, Yeah, that wouldn't be very cool, would
Yeah,
it?
especially if you bring the kids into it, absolutely,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Our producer just confirming the exact number who've completed their second vaccines is just shy of 82%, and for those over 60, 93% almost, which is pretty impressive, I'd say. And I think we caught up to many actually developed countries who got the vaccines much earlier because there was less resistance. And for boosters, it's 26% among the general population and 56% among those over 60, knowing that they are most likely to have the bad effects from COVID.
For the second stage vaccine, which is 82%, just shy of, as you said, I wonder if that's of the total population or the eligible people. For example, I wonder if that does include young children or those who cannot get it for medical reasons.
Yeah,
if you see what I mean.
I think it does. I think it's the total population. So that's even more impressive.
So it's even better, yeah. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of everyone. So.
Yeah, because we're not rolling them out yet to very young children either, right, here in Korea. Okay, and so I remember that Seoul, I think, backtracked and didn't make the foreigners do the test. And I think maybe even Gyeonggi, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but we've had recently in the last month, there were talks that Koreans vaccinated abroad would have their vaccination status certified in Korea, but foreigners wouldn't. So it's all been going, but gradually Korea has been accommodating to people with discussion and with push. So it just takes time, I think.
It's a shame that it has taken a little bit of a push. They shouldn't have been implemented in the first place.
Yep.
Moving on to April and vaccine, more good news for Korea?
Are we allowed to say this company?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Pfizer.
That'll be nice with a Happy Meal, a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. In order to get vaccines, because the number of possible vaccine in South Korea, it did start dipping at certain points. That was really high and everyone was getting it. And then the vaccines were running out.
Yes.
And there was this demand to get Pfizer vaccines, seen as these kind of very reputable, trustworthy from the United States.
Because we had AstraZeneca first, right?
Yeah, that's right. And there was this demand for the Pfizer ones with news reports and things like that. One of the ways that came about, and this is according to the domestic Korean press, was through the Samsung Scion Lee Jae-young.
Oh.
And he used his connections in, obviously a very well-connected man in very different aspects of international and global business to help South Korea get vaccines for about 20 million people, the news reported.
I didn't know he played that role. Was he not in prison?
And he played that role while he was in prison at the time. And so this led to many people saying, we need this man to be out of prison. We need him to, he will be of benefit to the country. So he was in there for associations with the ex-president and impeachments and bribery.
Yes.
But then later released for the good that he could do to the country in that regard. So that was how the chaebols, these big conglomerates, can play a role with their influence and with their sway.
Yeah, in a positive fashion in that sense. Because I think we've mentioned before, it's sometimes seen as unfair how they get pardoned. But in that case, if you're getting 20 million Pfizer vaccines, I think that might be a bit of good that you're doing. On to May.
On to May. In May, Korea was approaching 2,000 deaths, but the big story in May was about different variants coming into the country. And so we had the variant from India, we had the variant from the United Kingdom, and this was it was getting scary for people because there were new strands coming. And I remember when this all started breaking that we were very much discouraged from saying where COVID had come from, you know, which Northeast Asian country where it might have originated from. We were very explicitly told not to say that. But during this time when we had variants from India, from the United Kingdom, they were sort of plastered all over the news. And when I told people sort of, I'm from England, people would slowly, I could feel it.
Have you been back recently?
Yeah,
that was interesting, wasn't it? You're right, because the origin, we really didn't play that up at all like some other countries, but with these variants.
It's just how I saw it in South Korea at the time.
Wow, that's an interesting difference. Lots of messages. Seems COVID is united in its effect on all the countries across the globe. There must be some places where it's been a bit different, where they've been almost unaffected, like some deserted island somewhere. I'd love to hear from someone there who's like, COVID, what?
I wonder what the penguins make of it all.
Yes. I was listening as well, like lots of animals can get infected by COVID, and that's the big thing here that experts were saying, even if you got 100% vaccinated, because it's in animal populations, it'll come back to humans, like in terms of variants. Maybe even some of the variants we've seen have come from animal mutations and stuff. We're going to have to learn to live with it, but unfortunately with corona is temporarily on hold here in Korea. Forever Young says, Tara from Germany, I just hope and pray that COVID will end soon. Don't want to lose more lives. Everyone stay healthy, safe, and take care of others too. I think that's a good general message for life.
Yeah, especially in seeing what's going on in the Netherlands and Germany, mainland Europe as well. All the best to you there. Jackie Wong says, agreeing with you that, of course, it's a no-brainer that we must be careful, but one of Yao's classmates, I believe that's her son, bragging about how the parents took them to amusement parks, water parks, Christmas shopping.
It's really tough, though, with kids, isn't it? Because if they're open and technically you're allowed to go, it's really a judgment call, isn't it, I suppose?
Yep.
And here in Korea, a lot of those facilities are open and kids are going, but there are parents who are worried and don't take them.
Yeah.
It's really tough. Gwen says, I think the US is maybe more lucky. We had less restrictions, but more cases, and I don't think we can afford another lockdown. Yeah, the economic side is another big head scratcher.
Devastating. Loretto is saying, in the Philippines, booster shots are free, but the priority is medical professionals, seniors, and those with illnesses, establishments operating at 50%. And the total number of employees. I think this is what's great about the Daily K community you have here, Peter, because you get to learn about different experiences from all around the world. And
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic.
It'd be lovely if, like, governments worked like this. They all had a little YouTube chat and they just discuss with one another the pros and cons.
I'd like them to do a little bit more than just discuss things. I mean, we're discussing things. They can change the world for us, please.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So moving on in 2021, where do we find ourselves?
Well, in the summer, we had the arrival of Delta. And it's, we've kind of almost forgotten about that.
Yes.
And that was... I can't speak from a scientific place of authority because it's not my sort of doctoral PhD.
Yeah.
But that was quite serious, the Delta variant. And it was a big worry. That hit South Korea in July. And it hit when the vaccines were sort of stalling down. So they were really, really going down at that period in July. But you get to September, which is the Chuseok time in South Korea. And they start talking about, hey, we're going to start living with COVID. And now, at that time, the daily number of cases, the record high was just over 2,000 in September. And you said the past week it's been, 7,000?
Yes.
So in September, people in South Korea, they were talking about, we're going to start living with COVID. It's this big Thanksgiving holiday.
Sure.
So many people traveled around the country. Statistics in the news said 30 million South Koreans or went to their hometowns or took trips.
Oh, in this past September. Oh, yeah, you're right. They kind of said it's okay. Not like do it 100%, but it's okay if you must.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There was no sort of restrictions on travel. And I think that's one thing that's very important, because when I do speak to people from the United Kingdom, they seem to automatically assume that in South Korea there have been lockdowns.
Yeah,
there
like
have been really
ones, right?
strict ones, but we've never in South Korea been restricted in seeing our friends, our family, our loved ones, going shopping or anything like that. Has never been imposed on any citizen of South Korea.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really brilliant thing.
It's unbelievable, that we've kept the numbers so low without that. And you're right, most of my British friends also assume that we've been really strictly controlled, like with those bubbles that they had to create in the UK. And there, you were staying at home unless you were exercising, and then otherwise you had to be in your home, right? And we've not had anything like that here.
And conversely, for example, let's say my brother-in-law doesn't understand how that would work in the United Kingdom. So he said to me, well, what if I want to go and see my mum? And I would say, no, that wouldn't be legally allowed. And the look on his face of pure confusion that would be taking place in a country, the United Kingdom, one that I think he holds in some esteem or reputation. He was thinking, really? You guys are doing that? You're a bit backwards, David.
Yeah, it's maybe a bit counterintuitive, because people have been so congratulatory and saying, well done to Korea for listening to the government guidelines. But if that came in force, I don't know how well we'd listen, to be honest. Yeah, maybe it would be a foreign concept and we wouldn't deal with it. Who knows? Right?
I think there's a history that plays a role, and I think South Korea's history of military dictators and lockdowns, and that all plays in. You can't do that to the people at the moment. In terms of South Korea's success this year, because I do want to stress it a little bit more. Looking at statistics from October, deaths per million people, which is a strange way to look at things. I do apologize on a Monday morning. But for every million people in South Korea, 54 had lost their lives.
Okay.
The global average is 628.
During these COVID times?
During these COVID times.
Wow, that is tiny.
It is. Of course, any death is too many, but 54 out of a million with an average of coming up to 700 in other parts of the world. It's fantastic what it's done there. And most of the South Korean citizens, when asked to evaluate the government and the country's response to COVID, have been positive. Not overwhelmingly, and there are some rumbles about different things, but overall, I think the South Korean citizens feel very content with the way that the COVID situation, specifically in health, and the numbers involved, has been handled to this point.
Yeah, and then we're getting closer to now, right, in the timeline. If that was October, and then what was it, in November, where the plans were firmly being put into place with Corona, right?
So in November, from November the 1st, they said that, 80% had been vaccinated of the 52 million people, has one of the, top 10 vaccination rates in the world, actually then living up to its status as one of these top 10 countries, as a member of the OECD, and achieving these things and doing so well. And so living with COVID began, and people thought, well, here we go. There are going to be some bumps and obstacles along the way. But from November the 1st, the country sort of opened up a little bit, and there was this freedom that began. Yeah,
the biggest thing, I think, was many establishments being able to open as late as they want, right? Which had not been the case for many a month in 2021, if at all, as far as I remember. And I think we were expecting a spike in the number of daily cases. It was just the serious hospitalizations we were thinking with the vaccine rates would be low enough for the hospitals to handle. But that has not proved the case, unfortunately.
No, it's not. So after 3 weeks of the Living with COVID program, the government, as Omicron has come in, and again, I don't speak on a position of scientific authority on this, but the Omicron variant seems to be more highly transmissible. It seems to spread. Whether it's as serious as previous variants like Delta, I think that's for the scientists to look at, but is very transmissible. And as I said, what was it, back in October, the highest number of cases was 2,000.
Yes.
In January, it was 1,000. Now, South Korea is regularly having 7,000. And over the weekend, 5,300, I think the PDNIM said. So there has been this huge jump, and that puts pressure on the health workers. That puts pressure on the infrastructure. And I just want to close out by saying that I feel so much for those people working in the hospitals, in the clinics, because it's a hard job at the best of times. And I have great respect for them. But now they're doing it during a pandemic. They're doing it in all these hazard suits. You see them having to wear it. Must be so hot, so uncomfortable, with no sense of a break or a respite coming, even Christmas, because we might celebrate a little bit for Christmas. The people working in these places, like wherever you are in the world, please, send your love and respect. I'm not sure if that's enough, but we need to think of them, I think, during these times.
Absolutely. Wise words to finish up on, David. Thanks for that. Maybe not most hopeful of lookbacks at 2021, but much needed. Have a great Christmas, Dave, and we'll see you next Monday.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry Christmas. You can listen to Monday's segment Now and Then with David Tizard every Monday from 10 a.m. KST on #DailyK.